focus now. Days after the Central Pollution Control Board submitted to the NGT that the water quality in Prayagraj during the Maha Kumbh Mela did not meet bathing water quality standards due to high fecal coliform levels, the board has now stated that the water quality in Prayagraj was in fact fit for bathing based on statistical analysis. Now, the report dated 28th of February highlights that variations in water sample data required a detailed statistical review to assess overall river water quality, and it was found that there were significant fluctuations in key water quality parameters. That is, let's break that down for you: pH, or dissolved oxygen, or biochemical oxygen demand, and fecal coliform levels across different dates and locations. Now, a committee reviewed the data variations and concluded that factors such as human activities, river flow, sampling depth, and the current mixing affected the readings. Now, this latest report is in contradiction, very important to note here, to what the CPCB had stated last month when it deemed the water quality unfit due to high levels of fecal coliform. All right, to better understand that, I'm given to know at this point of time, I have my guests joining me this morning, Vimlendu Jha, Environmentalist. Vimlendu, thank you very much for taking the time out, joining us here on Mirror Now. Essentially, what does one make of this contradicting reports? More so because, how can one trust also the water quality reports with the given situation when you have such large gatherings as well? What does this tell us, and how are you looking at it?
Basically, of course, this event called Maha Kumbh, the credit was taken by Yogi Adityanath and also by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So this was a joint event between both the central government as well as the state government, and it was very, very embarrassing. When the Central Pollution Control Board report earlier came, saying that the water is not fit for bathing and not even fit for Achman, and indeed that was CP, and everyone said that this is not someone else, this is not an NGO talking about Ganga being polluted. This was government's own agency, government's own environmental agency actually claiming that the water was actually polluted. Indeed, that was a submission that was made in NGT, and right now UP Pollution Control Board suddenly said, no, well, they don't believe in the data. There was a Sonkar committee. There was a scientist called Sonkar who also came up and said, oh, well, no, there's no pollution at all. Right now, if you look at this one, this is mostly face saving that we're talking about here. Right now, what CPCB is actually talking about, if you look at their yesterday's report, they're talking about a median reading. Now, please understand that in pollution-related monitoring, there's nothing called median that could be done because, for example, if the water quality was 1,600 times worse on a particular day, and on 30th day, if the water becomes very, very clean, you can't really go and say that let's average it out. Just because something is extremely clean and extremely poor, that doesn't make sense that on the day that it was extremely poor is not valid at all. So there's something wrong in the science in which CP is trying to save itself or save embarrassment for itself and for UP government, because the coliform levels were not just checked and dissolved oxygen levels were not just checked on one particular date. It was actually checked on several dates. In fact, it was also checked in November before Kumbh started, and coliform levels were really terrible before Kumbh started. So one has to really understand that, they can indeed, earlier people believed in CPCB data. Of course, people like us always think that government agencies are more of government face-saving agencies rather than actual bodies of governance. And the pollution control boards of our country, they work in 50% capacity and most of the time toe the line that the government wants it to toe. So in this case, again, as we were surprised that it actually took a stance contrary to what its own political masters wanted it to take. And now it is trying to face-save once again.
Vimlendu, as you point that out as well, given the fact that, do you think it's an appropriate way to assess water safety, or should we be more concerned about the occasional spikes? Given, like the fecal coliform levels that exceeded safe limits on specific days, like how you put that into perspective.
Absolutely. So median readings don't work. What median means is that series of readings and you come to the center of that reading. That doesn't work when you do pollution monitoring, because on some days, because of whatever, and it could be for two primary reasons. One is less release of fresh water from, say, the hydel projects that the fresh water was actually released in Ganga. So if that goes down, And if human activity, which is perhaps largely, we talk about bathing and excreta flow into the river, if that increases on that particular day, the reading of coliform level can actually spike up. And that's exactly what has happened. Just because on next day, you flood the river with more water, or if there's lesser human activity in terms of bathing or in terms of other things, that does not mean that the river was not polluted on the day that you actually read it to be polluted. So this is very convenient science where we bring in median input in political monitoring. So, for example, if I have 104-degree fever right now, and if I have 98 degrees after 2 hours, that doesn't mean that I don't have a fever now. It cannot be averaging out, as in that does not mean that I was not suffering from high temperature or fever. In simple terms, in commonsensical terms, this is what it actually means.
Hmm. All right, Vimlendu, appreciate you not only joining us with more on how one can essentially look at that, but also putting that into perspective for our viewers to better understand what that means. Thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here. But